Thinking about moving to Atlanta in 2023, here are some things that you should know about. What's up, y'all? My name is Victor. I'm a local real estate agent here in Georgia, and I put out videos every week about what it's like to live in Atlanta. In this video, we're talking about the things that you should know about if you're thinking about moving to Atlanta, Georgia. One of the first things that you should know if you're thinking about moving here is that we have a ton of trees all over the city, not just in the city of Atlanta, but also in the suburbs of Atlanta. We have trees everywhere. Atlanta is described as a city in the woods, and so it's really what it looks like. We have trees and woods and forest all over the metropolitan city. And this is kind of a surprise for a lot of people who are coming from other major cities like New York or Miami or LA, and they come here to Metro Atlanta and they're like super surprised by the almost tropical climate that we have here in Atlanta. It's not what you would expect from a major city in the US, but it surprises so many people. And one of the reasons for that is just because of how tall the pine trees are here in Georgia. And the pine trees are like the trees that are the most common. The pine trees are all over the state of Georgia, and they're so tall that they surprise a lot of people. So it's not uncommon to buy a home where the backyard is just filled with pine trees. It's like your house is in the woods or your house is in the forest. And there are some things that you should know about when it comes to those pine trees. For example, pine trees are very fast growing, but they don't have a very long lifespan. So it's not uncommon to hear of a pine tree falling over. And so if those pine trees are close to your home, they are often suggested that you cut those pine trees down if they're too close to the home to prevent damaging the home. In addition to that, pine trees are like the main source of the pollen that we have here in Georgia. So if seasonal allergies are an issue for you, you certainly want to keep in mind that the amount of pine trees that we have here could cause a problem with seasonal allergies. I know for me, it does cause problems. In fact, right now in the middle of spring, it's causing problems. And so I take like a daily seasonal allergy medicine to kind of alleviate that. And it helps for the most part, but there's no question that we have a lot of pollen here in Georgia. And then while we're talking about the trees and nature, you also should know that there's a lot of humidity here in Georgia and in Metro Atlanta. So not only are the summers hot like 95 degrees, maybe 100 degrees at their hottest, but they also are a very humid summer. So we have lots of humidity, high heat, which makes for summers like a sauna here in Metro Atlanta. But in the wintertime, it's a lot more mild. We don't have super frigid winters. Typically, they're mostly with average temperatures of maybe 20 degrees, maybe 30 degrees in the wintertime. However, we did just have a super cold winter. Just this past Christmas, the temperature got down to 6 degrees, but that's not very common. This next thing that you should know about has to do with the different parts of Metro Atlanta and where the schools are located. So if you're thinking about moving to any of the suburbs or the city of Atlanta, feel free to call, text, or email me anytime. Thank you so much to everyone who has reached out. I'm always happy to help. But when it comes to schools and home values, you should know that the north part of Metro Atlanta tends to have better school ratings than the southern part of Metro Atlanta. Also, you should know that the southern part of Metro Atlanta tends to have better home values than the northern part. Now, neither one of these two is better than another. It really comes down to your preference, but the schools on the north side tend to have school ratings of about 7 to 10 out of 10, according to greatschools.org. And on the south side, the school ratings tend to be a little bit lower, lots of 5s and 6s, according to greatschools.org. And then the home values no question that you can get more home for your money on the south side than you can on the north side. For example, in the city of Marietta, the average home value is about 450. So that's really what you're looking at for an average 3-bedroom, 2-bath home is about 450,000, whereas on the south side of Metro Atlanta, a typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in the city of Fayetteville might be closer to about 350. So no question that you can get more home for your money on the south side, but the school qualities are a little better on the north side. And again, really depends on your preference and what your priorities are for which one of those two is better than the other. Okay, this next one tends to catch a lot of people off guard, and that is that here in Metro Atlanta, we have a lot of houses with deferred maintenance, houses with roofs that are 20 years old, or HVAC systems that are 30 years old, or siding on the houses that are maybe have wood rot or some kind of water damage that typically a homeowner would take care of, but it's not as common here, or flooring on the interior of the home that is kind of like original to the home from 30 years ago. And this, again, seems to catch a lot of people by surprise when they're coming from other parts of the country. And I think the reason why it's so common here in Metro Atlanta to have this kind of deferred home maintenance is because of the lower home values that we have here. And for many people, they're not going to recoup that investment if they put it into the home, like remodeling a kitchen or changing the flooring or changing the roof might not necessarily get that return on investment here in Georgia because home values are so low. So unfortunately, it's kind of a catch-22 that we have here. Another really common one is the age of windows. It's very uncommon for people to change out windows here in Georgia. You can have a home built in the 60s and those windows are the same as they were in 1960. And again, that $20,000 investment might not get a return because of the lower home values. So this issue of deferred maintenance here in Georgia is certainly something that you want to take into account. Now, it's not all of the houses. It's not like every single house is falling apart with a 20-year-old roof. It's just a lot of houses. And sometimes it can be difficult to get that investment back. So something to think about when you're home shopping here in Metro Atlanta. Okay, this next thing that you should know about if you're moving to Atlanta is that the cost of living here in Atlanta is probably still lower than other major cities of the United States, but we are increasing in cost of living very quickly here in Atlanta. Many people kind of are looking for a place like Atlanta where the cost of living is a ton lower than where they currently live. But here in Atlanta, cost of living is rising very quickly. Just a few years ago, the average home value in Metro Atlanta was probably around 250, maybe 300. Today, it's closer to 450 or maybe 500. So if you're looking for a city that has a cost of living that's a lot less than the city you're coming from, you want to really keep in mind that the cost of living here is increasing very quickly. But if you're coming from another major city where the prices are a little more reasonable, you might want to remember that the cost of living here in Atlanta might be comparable to some of those other cities. And when you factor in the issue of deferred maintenance and some of the updates that many of the homes here require, you really need to be very specific about what part of Metro Atlanta you want to live in and which home you're choosing to live in as well. Of course, a home inspection goes a long way and is super important here in Metro Atlanta. And while we're on the subject of the home values, another thing is that the housing market here in Atlanta at the time of recording this video in the middle of April 2023, the housing market is heating up very quickly right now. In the wintertime, very few homes had multiple offers. Today, we are having multiple offer situations on homes regularly. The buyers are coming back. People are kind of getting over the shock of the super high interest rates, and it's becoming more and more common to see multiple offer situations here in Atlanta. And it all kind of goes together. The cost of living is increasing, and the housing market is heating up here in Metro Atlanta. So if you're thinking about moving to Atlanta, you really want to take those things into consideration. Another thing that you should know about if you're thinking about moving to Atlanta is that the Metro Atlanta area as a whole has 6 million people, and the city of Atlanta has about 500,000 people. So 5.5 million people live in the suburbs of Metro Atlanta. By far, most of the residents of Metro Atlanta live in one of the suburbs. And this is kind of interesting because it shows that most of the residents of Metro Atlanta prefer to live in the suburbs, not in the city of Atlanta. And then also, this is why we have such terrible rush hour traffic. Now, we don't have terrible traffic on all of the roads in Metro Atlanta, like some people kind of make it seem. It's mainly on the interstate systems that are going from the suburbs to the center of Atlanta. It's in the rush hour times in the mornings when all of those residents are driving to Atlanta, and then in the evening times when all of those people who live in the suburbs are driving from Atlanta back out to the suburbs. It's those interstate systems that tend to get bad traffic, and it is significant. It can go from a 30-minute commute from the suburbs to Atlanta to an hour commute during rush hour. So if you're home shopping here in Atlanta and you see that the commute from Marietta to Atlanta is like 30 minutes, you might want to check it again during rush hour. That can be a very big difference, that 30 minutes to an hour. So certainly something that you want to think about if you plan on living in one of the suburbs of Metro Atlanta. This next thing that you should know about is that Atlanta is a very diverse city with lots of different ethnicities represented, different cultures all over the state of Georgia, and especially in Metro Atlanta. Many people who come from other parts of the country kind of think of Atlanta as like the old school 70s and 80s, all one race or one ethnicity here in Metro Atlanta, but it is no longer like that. In 1996, Atlanta held the Olympic Games, and that was one of the biggest catalysts for people moving to the city of Atlanta and people of other cultures and other races moving to the city of Atlanta. Those Olympic Games were almost 25 years ago, and so no question that Atlanta has grown a lot since that time, and we have so many different rich cultures here represented in Atlanta, and that's really one of the best parts about living in Atlanta. As a minority myself, I never feel any kind of danger living here in Metro Atlanta because of being a minority. There's no kind of like safety issues with that. There are so many different races here in Metro Atlanta, and it really has become a melting pot in the United States. And there's no question that that's one of the best parts about living in Metro Atlanta. Okay, this next thing that you should know about if you're thinking about moving to Atlanta or you're thinking about living in Atlanta is that every city, every suburb of Metro Atlanta tends to have like some kind of city center that is like the downtown part of that city. So Marietta has Marietta Square, Alpharetta has downtown Alpharetta, Suwanee has town center, and these are like the town centers or the downtown parts of those cities. It's in those areas where you can really get a very good feel for that city. That's where the courthouse tends to be, but that's also where you can find a lot of shopping and a lot of restaurants. There's also usually like some kind of park or green space in those town center areas as well. So if you're visiting here in Atlanta and you want to get an idea for what those suburbs are like, visiting the town center is a great way to get that idea of what that city is like. And then if you're living here in Atlanta, those areas, those town centers tend to be like the area where a lot of people hang out and spend time. My family and I love going to Marietta Square. It's a great place to hang out, spend time, especially for the kids. And then as well, we will sometimes visit places like downtown Alpharetta or town center in Swanee. And then as well, we'll sometimes visit like downtown Woodstock or downtown Roswell. No question that the downtown parts of these cities are very often where all the action is. And so there's some great places to visit if you're visiting here in Metro Atlanta, but also if you're living here in Metro Atlanta. And there are so many different suburbs all around the Metro Atlanta area. And some of those suburbs kind of suck, and some of those suburbs are really good. If you want to know what the best suburbs are of Metro Atlanta, check out this video. I'll see you there.